He's really he's shameless in intellectual argument. He's absolutely without character, a moral foundation, or even intellectual substance.
Welcome back to the Getting Lit podcast. This week, we are joined by two very special guests, the editors of a new book called Inversion, which is a sort of anthology about, I would say, the state of homosexuality. And we have to say homosexuality like that when we refer to it. But we're joined tonight by the editors who are Amir Naaman and Pierre de. I said it wrong, but whatever. You can say it.
No, I'm not going to gratify you with that.
Yeah.
But lovely to be
Delancey.
Very good.
Close
Very
enough.
good.
Close enough. Close
Yeah.
enough. Welcome, guys. And so yeah, happy to have you here. This was such an interesting collection for me because there's a lot of stuff that I've sort of thought about over the years. I've written about. I did a piece on compact that has a lot of resonances with some of this stuff. And yeah, I've written about this stuff a lot. What I liked about this was the range of views, right? And I think that was something that was very intentional with you guys, in terms of you wanted not to do, this is the queer theory book, this is the reactionary gay book, this is the, Larry Kramer activist gay book. It's none of those things, but it also kind of can encompass a lot of those various different things. So I really admired that about it. But first of all, before we get into the book, I wanted to ask you, Pierre, about Vergerin and what that's all about. And this is who published it as well. How did that start? And it's sort of an event space as well as a publisher now. Like, explain this to me.
Yeah, it's a bit of everything. So we were joking earlier that people occasionally say that Vergerin, which is in London, is London's Times Square, which is sort of an amazing description, which I never say anything to. I sort of like frown, but let it pass because it means absolutely nothing. Vergerin came out of sort of a shared frustration after COVID, which now seems to be a million years ago, but also went on for a million years. Me and a bunch of people were completely disappointed by the fact that no one was doing any serious thinking in public. No one was disagreeing about things that mattered, and in fact, the kind of polite society was just memory holding major, very recent events. So I've got together with a bunch of people, and we started doing events. They started very simply, book launches, discussions. Then they grew into symposia, film screenings, and we simply pose ourselves as an alternative to the institutional, whether that be your kind of auditorium in an art museum or an academic conference. So we do all of these things trying to be quite simply not retarded and not too polite. And sort of in a way that you nodded to the book without getting ourselves captured by any particular single ideology. So that's what we've been doing in London for the last couple of years. We also started a publishing venture, which Amir and I have been working on super hard. And Inversion was our first book. And that, again, came from the realization that the kind of thing that we wanted to do would not really happen anywhere else. And Matt, I'm sort of now mortified because I'm pretty sure that your writing was one of the references for what we wanted to do. So now I'm wondering why it is that we did not ask you to invite to contribute to the book. But anyhow,
right.
one of the things in our minds was that the kind of sort of dissenting or discontented writing about the state of gay life, gay culture, gay biopolitics, gay history, or whichever aspects whichever aspect is of any relevance, that there were small markers, there were pieces in compacts. You've written one, I've written one, there were maybe like three others. There's maybe, literally, we could think of like 5 or 6 writers who would desperately say things that to us were utterly obvious. Like, well, there are downsides to chemsex. The golden era of gay
Oof, you're not
culture
allowed
has
to say that.
passed. And so
You're not allowed
I'm
to say
allowed to
that.
say
You
whatever.
know why you're not allowed to say that? Because that's stigmatizing, Pierre. You're not allowed to
That's
say
drug
Um,
shame.
well, funnily enough, the first review of the book came out was by your fellow Australian, Jared Bartle, who hates me
Yes.
because we had an argument exactly about that on Twitter like 2 years ago. No, no, leave the chemsex gays alone. They're just living the best lives. It's like, uh-huh.
Shout out,
Yes.
Jared, if you're listening.
God, loathsome fag. Um,
Damn, Pierre.
yeah, come on, come on. I mean, say something
Well, he
polite.
actually already wrote the bad
Amir's,
review, so it's fine.
yeah. Amir is the kind of polished publicity machine of the outfit, so he can
No,
field the rest of
I'm
the
the liberal.
inquiries.
I'm the one who wants to get along.
I'll go on.
Yeah. So like, would you say you're the one who wants to go along? Get
Oh,
along, go along to get along, sort of.
I have, my problem is like I'm always very, very attracted to people who don't have my problem of wanting to get along. So I'm very like, Pierre likes something which I kind of ideologically, let's say, inside my mind, I'm all for this kind of big conversations and everybody can say what they want and let's talk and let's and be offensive, but I'm too chicken shit to actually be that. So I always gravitate to people who can do it for me. So when I came to London for the first time and I went to Verdun, it was like for me like a breath of fresh air. I love that place where you can actually not agree, and that is what is expected of you. So come and we think together. And somehow in the events I took part in Verdun, and nobody was offended and took anything personally. Today discourse somehow changed. It's impossible to think aloud. And Verdun somehow, and I have no idea why, it is it is possible. And I don't know how Pierre does it because Pierre, and I'm saying this with all respect, is confrontational. Okay, and I say this with admiration, Pierre. But it is not. It somehow in his space is not does not push people away. It kind of welcomes you in, and I'm very grateful to have found that place. To be honest, I live in Berlin, and in Berlin, discourse when it's I mean, my German is not amazing, so I can't speak for general German discourse, but goddamn, that place is stifling for thought, for art, and meeting Pierre and this kind of crew that is kind of hanging around Verdun was an amazing experience for me.
Hmm. Hmm.
Do you mind if I don't return the compliment? I think it's too early for a circle jerk, but I will just say one very simple thing to explain the attitude of what I do and maybe of the book. This while both the book and what I do at Verdun is deadly serious to the extent that if it were presented to the world as what it actually is, nobody would come because it is actually boring. I get people to go and say very, very complex things about very complex things that don't necessarily lead to easy solutions. I think the trick is that I have to be a bit of a clown. I have to say sometimes not edgy things, but this is how people seem to read them. But once you make the example of just sort of like utter freedom, without necessarily disavowing the consequences of the freedom, that encourages people to think and be critical. That's all it is, and that's kind of what we wanted to do with the book when we were commissioning writers, of which there's almost a dozen. Like I recall that a very big component of the brief for writers was to be as sort of impolite as possible, but to always remember to include themselves in the critique. So the book is a series of critiques that look at various aspects of homosexuality, its culture, its history, so on, as I rolled out. And I think every single one of the essays is careful to include the positionality of the writer in whatever critique it builds, or
Sounds
in
very
whatever
queer
proposal
theory
it
of you.
does. Oh,
Sounds very
no.
standpoint theory of you. Anyway, no, I'm just joking. I'm
Yeah,
just
no,
prodding.
look. These are problems that are back formations. These are the things that you allude to are back formations and ways to paper over a kind of fundamental problem of people being able to criticize
Mm,
themselves.
mm.
And I will just for a bit of titillation tell you that seems to me like one of the more popular chapters in the book by Ran Helbrun is a sort of massive takedown of queer theory. It's a very strict and very detailed text. But maybe kind of the big picture is to ask a question: what is the problem with gay men today? Yeah, like I
Mm.
mean, this might be a good way to think about the book. And if you went out to the street and asked people, you would notice that there is a beginning of discontentment, which on Twitter is obvious, but in the street not so much. But there's a split between gay and queer. There's a split between gay and queer and trans, and that has now gone through a whole cycle of queer wars, culture wars, um, to the extent that the positions are sort of clear and people have already been able to see what those positions mean politically. But if you went and asked about other problems, you would sort of find a population that's completely confused, precisely because while it is easy to, from whatever position you are, to acknowledge that, oh, those trans people, they've gone a little bit too far, they're ruining it for everyone else. Oh, sorry, for all of us. It is incredibly difficult, conversely, to be able to say, no, something I am doing, something that is foundational to me, that is creating a problem. That's not to say that trans is contained within homosexual. I'm not making that equality sign at all. But the thing that we wanted to address is the ways in which gay men are responsible for where they've got themselves to. And that could include
Mm.
discontentment with themselves.
Yeah, which is really it's a really funny dynamic, and it's sort of gestured towards that is gestured towards in a lot of the chapters with this like um examination of the self, but at the same time, there's this kind of like to a lot of gay media, for instance. I was actually thinking of there's this, how you have show like TV shows that you sort of just watch with your significant other. You're not really that into it or whatever, but you just sort of do it. One of these shows is the Apple.
I
Pierre's
don't know.
shrugging.
I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
participate in this kind of culture, but
Okay,
go on.
okay, but so there's an Apple TV series called Palm Royale, right? And it's got what's her name? Kristen Wiig in it, and it's set in the 60s, and it's about this kind of like striver woman who's trying to get into the Palm Royale, this beautiful palatial like beach clubhouse in Florida somewhere in the 60s. So there's like it's got all the 60s accoutrement and all that sort of stuff. So all the fashion, like all the gays and gals would love that, all the 60s fashions and stuff. But there's a character played by Ricky Martin who is gay in the 60s.
Mhm.
And there's this weird thing going on where everyone's kind of okay with it. Like, and it's just like and I'm reminded of when we had David Mamet on, and he was talking about how cinema, cinema's kind of dead now, and it's dead because it's kind of a victim of its own success. And I got a lot of that, like when I see like all of this gay media and films, and like even like rewriting historical epochs, like oh, there's
Mm.
the gay guy, like as if that's like an archetype that would have just been like everyone would have just been completely cool with back in the 60s or whatever. Like it's like the homosexual question. It's a like you're a victim of your own success in a way because all of this
Mm.
media proliferation, representations and stuff, um, just has this very uncritical, like and very unrealistic, but also kind of very self-serious sort of depictions of homosexuality and gayness or whatever you want to call it.
Do you remember a while ago there was this Netflix show? I think it was Ryan Murphy called Hollywood.
Yes, but I didn't see it. Yeah. Ryan Murphy's very
That was,
interesting in terms of the gay question, but go on. Yes.
I mean, that was something amazing to watch. How they rewrote history in the most kind of unashamed, I mean, shamelessly, and they made like Rock Hudson be kind of a weak character because he wouldn't come out. Where it's so fine to be kind of gay and an interracial kind of gay relationship. And Pierre said before that when we're in the book we're trying to look at what fault the gays have to where they have come to now, and I think we can't actually since lately because of our success we've rewritten our history. We don't really know
Mm.
where we are now. Okay, the more people talk constantly about homosexuals, it seems that uh, the less we know. In order
Mm,
to accept homosexuality, we need to make it into some kind of fantasy, like Ryan Murphy did in Hollywood, or uh, and um, and fantasy only works when there is no knowledge. You cannot
mm,
know. There's so much stuff you have to hide. Um, when you have to hide when the homosexuality was actually indeed a victim kind of status. And also when homosexuality has a dark side, which does not mean it should or should not exist, but it does, it's a big part of it. And it's like all of us, the gays, we know, but we can't talk about it. And we also kind of we kind of forget it. We kind of believe the fantasy.
mm.
So how do we know where we are now as whatever it
Th-
is? If it's
There is I keep bringing up media examples, but like I just do that because they're very interesting kind of flashpoints for a lot of this stuff. But I love that you went there with talking about like the dark side of things. But even on that surface level of the, superficial like gay kind of archetype stuff, like something has shifted that I think is important. I'm not quite sure what it is or like what I'm trying to pin down, but the media example last one I give, I promise, just in this initial bit anyway, is that Queer Eye show, right? I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember the original,
the
but
original what?
We are older than you, Matt. We're very old.
Queer Eye for the Straight Guy.
Oh yeah, we're old.
Yeah. Do you remember that show?
Yeah, yeah.
I
Yeah.
do, I
Yeah.
do.
Okay, so I remember that being kind of like garish and sort of like early 2000s, really the kind of height of that sort of reality TV boom. And it was like very artificial, witty, like, and the witticisms were very barbed. It was kind of hilarious. It was garish and bright. And it was completely irreverent in that like classic gay way. And now the remake, which is like on Netflix. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but I suspect you'd both hate it. Uh, it's like they're like fairy godmothers in like this really like effusive way. It's very self-serious. It's very lachrymose. Everyone is always crying all the time. Like I don't understand. Like,
Mm.
but
Jesus,
and
sounds
so
like
I think there's something there in terms of the what's going on with the crisis in homosexuality that it like even that sort of superficial representation of it, um, like it's way worse now. Like,
Look,
so
there
what's
is
that about?
there is a historical arc, and I think that condition of not knowing that Amir referred to, I think it's really important, and it affects absolutely everyone. I mean, gay men are not special; just gay men
Mm,
happen to be quite often the sort of foot soldiers of many sexual and kind of liberal, individualistic revolutions. Um, it's sort of sobering to, excuse me, it's sobering to take the idea of social determinism more seriously than it really deserves to. Because if we go through the history of terms like inversion, which is super antiquated and probably taboo today, which is precisely why we picked it for the title of the book. But also it, of course, implies sort of like putting something completely out of joint on a much larger scale. So inversion, homosexuality, gayness, and queerness, these are all things, all of them are things that are to a certain extent socially constructed. So shockingly, even those today who will say, oh, no, no, sexual orientation is a biological thing. It really does exist. So don't call me queer because I'm really homosexual, indeed, as you wish to be pronounced. There is an element by which homosexuality does have to be ascribed, and it's a medical term, and it's a medical term that comes about under all the circumstances that today's critical theory junkies will complain about. You know, it's not it wasn't as liberated and as person centered as it could have been. Blah 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 blah. So if you take all of this for granted and imagine that actually a lot of concepts that we rely on to ground ourselves are exactly this flighty. We really are in a position where we don't know anything. What we do get access to is waves of critique. And I think what's interesting in that kind of cultural breakdown that you were both talking about a moment ago is that we do actually have a very good memory of that. So our sort of primer for this book was Mark Simpson's collection of essays Anti-Gay, which is 1995 or 96. It's probably the last book of the kind that we were thinking of when we were putting this together. We could not think of anyone else having, like done a sort of an assault on gayness in the last 30 years. And Mark's collection has a very heavy critique of the Pink Pound, which is the thing that really rolls behind a lot of this cultural development, and also the kind of unthinking, self-affirming culture that that moment produces. And how do we think about it? Well, we think about, I sort of hate that this is where I've ended up, but I think gay men, particularly gay men of our generation and generation up, have sort of ended up being the foot soldiers for all that goes wrong in neoliberal society. We become hyper individuals with just enough freedom to grow old, sort of completely disgracefully, alone and thinking only about ourselves and having never spared a thought for anyone else. We 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 devalue institutions to the extent that when we finally get access to them, they mean nothing. So gay marriage is one of those things. Yes, we get gay marriage, just as marriage means absolutely nothing. I think in a sense the same thing happens with women post the sexual revolution. There is a reason that a lot of gay liberation movements and sort of radical leftist, 1970s women's movements are twinned together. That history is sort of fascinatingly complicated, and it's not entirely clear who's in charge, who's expressing their will. But the things that we could point out in the dissolution of culture, the excess freedom, the kind of rampant individualism, yeah, they should be more accessible to our historical memory. And it is a sort of fascinating artifact of how we are composed, that we make that denial. Just if you think about what kind of a brain one needs to be able to compare the original Queer Eye with the remake, like that's a marginal pursuit. We just accept that this is how it is. One of the things that's actually was quite poignant, one of the reasons I thought I was compelled to put the book together is that we did a series of events together with Amir, trying to discuss some of these issues live. We found that it was absolutely impossible to get people to say anything that worth saying at all. But one of the good contributors was Vanity Van Glow, a drag queen who sort of complained about how 15 years ago drag in London was about screaming into a microphone on stage and calling men faggots. And now it's Becky from Accounts from the home counties who does exactly, who comes to drag performance for exactly the same reason that the Queer Eye time happens. She wants to be affirmed. She needs to be told that she's super special. And yeah, since when
Yeah.
rampant individualism? Since when was rampant individualism and chemsex going to turn gay men into support animals for insecure girls. I mean,
Poor animal.
this is
It's
a perversion, surely.
it's funny that you say Becky from Accounts, because Australia's most famous like younger drag queen is Karen from Finance. So
Oh,
that's
gosh.
literally her name, and that's her whole shtick. But anyway, um, but yeah, I totally agree with you. Like how this like, and this you actually start to sound like a rabid Butlerian queer theorist sometimes when you talk about this stuff. He's like, drag used to be about like you know, freaking out the squares, man. But when now it's sort of like all commodified and stuff, and but it's also like this. It's not just that; it's also that kind of individual affirmation thing. And
Mm,
drag's popularity is, like you say, it is a largely a woman-led thing. Like, and
mm.
that's when things, not to get too misogynist too early, but that's when things started to go downhill, because then it
Well,
becomes inclusive rather than exclusive, which was what it
yeah.
was, where men calling each other faggots in the gay club or whatever. It's like, there was that kind of like, well, I was talking about the barbed sort of witticisms and bitchiness and stuff that
Mm.
kind of like is alleviated when you have to like, spare the feelings of non-faggots, for instance.
Yeah, I think this is a good point for Amir to talk about transgressions. The people who hated the book have thought that all we're interested in is transgression, which I don't think we are, but there's quite a lot of that going on, really.
I don't think it's primarily interested in transgression, but it would be kind of a lie, Pierre, to say that some of the things that kind of drove us to do the events and to publish the book and compile the book is that we did want to kind of stir some kind of those feelings that come with transgression. And also, and here, for instance, we have writers who are more in the intellectual kind of, who come from academia. I'm thinking of you, Pierre, I'm thinking of Ran, who are interested in kind of society and intellectual elements of homosexuality. And I've come to realize the more I talk about the book and think about it, how where I came from this book, from the point of view of like of the artists, not because I'm an artist, I'm just not an intellectual. And I have been following gay artists and or figuring out what is the gayness or whatever, I won't say queerness in art. And that primarily has to do with the transgressive point of view, or that things are a bit um, skew, right? I've been always like I've been thinking about it lately that I've been kind of have I had this fixation with finding writers who are homosexual who wrote horror stories. I'm always
Mm.
I really loved horror stories when I was younger, and I still kind of do. And you have like the famous ones like Clive Barker, for instance, who it's very obvious that he's looking at those images and that kind of tradition through a very certain set of eyes. And there's also these two Americans who I discovered kind of lately, not as famous. If you know Michael Talbot, he wrote this vampire book called A Delicate Dependency, which is kind of a mishmash of kind of French decadence and vampire lore, kind of seen through a bit of a homosexual lens. And there is a Southern Gothic writer called Michael McDowell, who also wrote Beetlejuice, the
Oh,
movie,
yeah.
but he has this series of very kind of dense Gothic family melodramas in the South. And I'm always trying to find this kind of very delicate, transgressive streak in them. And I think the homosexuals today, also in my what I wrote for the book, there is some kind of nostalgia for the lost transgressive nature of homosexuality, which is not allowed to really come to the fore now. I mean, today you're allowed to, in the streets of Berlin, you're allowed to dress up as a dog and fist somebody in public, but it is allowed and expected of you in some strange way. So transgressivity, can you say transgressivity?
Why not?
Transgressiveness?
Mm.
Why not? Fuck it. that's me being transgressive, is kind of by decree now. Okay, you have to, and there is certain kind of transgressions you're allowed and expected to perform, but others that you are not allowed to. And I think when Pierre and I went on the voyage of compiling this book, we were looking for the true transgressions of thought and of critique, try to find what they are.
Yeah, but well, it's funny because allowed transgression is a contradiction. Like it's a paradox. Like if
Yes,
it's allowed, it's not really transgressive, right? So,
exactly.
and it's
Well,
always
You can perform it.
yeah, I'm reminded again of like other queer media. I don't want to say queer media, gay media. Like that is
Homosexual.
homosexual media, like things like RuPaul's Drag Race. And the only transgression that's like it's funny because there's a will to transgression with a lot of gay men. Like, but it's not it is in very narrow terms. So like it's always political. It's always how bad Republicans and Trump are on these shows. But
Yeah.
it's never any other type of transgression. So it's funny how it's just that will to transgress has been funneled into very particular kind of avenues, or it's a mixed metaphor, but you know what I mean.
But I think that there's a fundamental question. I mean, for transgression to exist, there needs to be some constraint. Sorry to sort of take it back to, to the please oppress me harder, daddy kind of narrative. And I've been trying to, since the book, partly because every time we speak about it, I mean, I just keep myself interested. I come up with slightly more unhinged takes. But if you think about the consequences of a kind of broad sexual liberation of not only gay men but also women in almost the same generation, and then the kind of complete sexual and moral liberation of absolutely everyone. What we forget is that the structures against we still sort of nominally kick, like the patriarchy or indeed the Republicans, who sort of become a cipher for a system of norms and rules, that these institutions had very particular roles. And I'm sort of parroting and or maybe bastardizing some thoughts from Simone de Beauvoir, who speaks about women, and she essentially says that the the freedom to live without the patriarchy for women is the freedom to fail without guide rails. So to take this back to the gay element, if one could romanticize the kind of clandestine conduct of homosexual life in something like Forster, for instance, that I bring up because it then got this got blown up into the bloody Inheritance, like the worst piece of theatre ever written. Um, um, to have to be who you are in today's parlance while the entire world forces you to hide it means that you have to find outlets that are not just being out the living. Yeah, there are you create aesthetic outlets, you create criminal outlets, you create an underworld, and so on and so on. So I think today's gay culture is an inheritor of a lot of this underground. This is why we still have Drag Race, which is nominally slightly edgy. This is why we still have, actually, what do we have? Well, this is, but none of the kind of fisting in public is of that ilk at all, because that was sort of never really persecuted. That was actually all always allowed, except that all that happened is that all sexuality became public. Not just gay men's sexuality became public. Everyone's sexuality became public. So it's very, very, very dispiriting to see that the only thing that gay men can out in the very small contribution to the degradation of everything that they're making, like because gay men are sort of like marginal subjects in the queer sexual third revolution that we're living through. Um, they just sort of on the contribution is to piss on each other in public. Like this is quite
I want to say something which I
not
don't know
particularly
even,
exciting,
I
really.
mean, it's exciting-ish, but there is something I suddenly thought about it, and it has to do perhaps because I'm in the sun. And I'm thinking suddenly of kind of a will to live. And when I was very young, I got to meet my grandfather. He lived till he was 97. And at some points during the end of his life, he used to say that I'm dead, but I forgot to fall, or something like that. And it
Mm.
seems like something about gay culture is has or what I was fascinated by, or the the joie de vivre of gay culture has died, but it has forgotten to fall. And there is a zombie apocalypse vibe to everything. And I would like to think, at least, that with this book, with perhaps with elements of it, which might be, I can liken to like shock therapy. We want to kind of revive a will to live in the gays. Now, I don't
Mm.
know what that means, okay? And but the will to live means also to embrace, um, you know, the unsavory aspects of life, the dirt of it, and the contradictory nature of it. And today it seems that everybody is a zombie. If Dawn of the Dead. So in the movie, the zombies come to life and they all come to the mall because that's what they remember of life, or that is what
Oh.
their bodies did. And it seems like the gays are coming back to the mall because that's what they're used to. And everything else was taken away from them. We need to, I kind of, today, because I'm in a kind of optimistic mood, whatever, I think return to life is necessary.
I'm going to make the opposite call. I want to bring back the death drive, which is obviously it's obviously the obverse of what you're talking about. It has
Well,
to
you need
come.
the
It has
death
to come
drive
together.
is can only work if there's a will to live.
Yeah,
I
exactly,
mean,
exactly. Yes. That is quite obvious. But I think I would make an even worse characterization of the kind of latent embodied memory of what gay men do, and that's not to do with sort of shopping and fucking, because that phase is that phase is fundamentally conditioned by economic abilities. We have a chapter, which have a really poignant chapter about this by Roger Lancaster, who writes about class and the sort of illusion of class and homosexuality. So if you can't afford to get to the right clubs and wear the right clothes, I'm sorry, you're not gay. You're just a loathsome fag. I love the phrase "loathsome fag."
It's so
This
good.
should be like a a term of endearment and death that we use. And how? What was I trying to say? I think that rather than the kind of sexual excess that is at the forefront of the gay DNA, it's actually a propensity to deception. One of the, I think, far worse critiques that one can make of gay men is to understand that when gay men find some kind of social acceptance, they end up going to work in marketing. This is literally every other gay man in the world works in marketing, which is lying to people for a living.
Yeah.
And I do mean this more profoundly. I haven't developed it much further, but like, this is how we opened the book, like where we used to have people like Oscar Wilde, and we had some adjectives about what is transgressive about Oscar Wilde, and now we have the you know
The
Jamie, the marketing manager. I think, oh God.
Yeah, who are probably partially responsible of making everything gay now, rather than like
Yeah.
there's this kind of like directness to, and it's not just in marketing, obviously, it's in the so-called creatives, like
Mm.
your Ryan Murphys and stuff like that, who, as like schlocky as he is, I have a kind of respect for because he's got this like conveyor belt like production line, and sometimes his stuff is so outrageous, but that you just can't help but like love it. um, but your gay men who are creating media, art, so-called art, they're sort of like um, trapped in this vibe of like acceptance now, but also, like I said before, there is this sort of will to transgress, but they're still in that mode where they can't actually properly transgress anymore because, well, like we said, transgression is a sort of distributed thing, and like what is real transgression now and all
Mm.
that sort of stuff. But it is yeah, yeah, I think it's the stuff that's like being produced like from the gay mind, I think doesn't quite have the artfulness because in fact, arguing against what you were saying, Pierre, there's not enough lying or subterfuge because
Hmm.
I think the classic like gay works, for instance, when you take the gay experience and filter it through something else. Like, if you're a fan of Tennessee Williams, like he just uses like Southern dames to stand in for the gay experience. And that's what makes them so great. Like, there's a kind of
Yeah.
alchemy to the art there. Whereas, like, just directly like depicting the vicissitudes and indignities of gay male life is just sort of like there's no like art to it in a way. Like there can be, I guess, possibly, but I think, when you look to older stuff, it's like it's lost that kind of alchemical sort of um quality that the older stuff has because they're not like they don't have to do as much work basically to sort of like
Hmm.
get the point across, if you know what I'm saying.
Well, but look, this is an outcome of a much bigger term that I think
Mm,
the gay population has sort of spearheaded and has been doubling down, even if it's sort of recent split from trans and queer. We have to have sort of mass coercive affirmation completely guaranteed, and that produces a space in which to do anything creative, you have to create fictional extremes, not from life, but from, well, ideology, unfortunately. It would be great if we had, like, if homosexuality turned into queerness, gayness and queerness out of the imagination, that would be great, but that's not actually how it works. We are, in the last couple of decades, witnessing a sort of market-driven reshaping of this culture. One of the things I do during my days is that I'm an art critic, and I'm sort of, I don't know how to really describe it, but there was a point at which I started being able to spot, without looking at the name of the artist or reading the press release in the gallery, whether the artist was trans, which it's not it's not an idle exercise because we're talking like, 1 in 3 at a certain kind of
mm.
peak a few years ago. And you could sense, not merely from the garish colors, because that would be sort of fun,
Mm.
wouldn't it? Um, but from an element in which something about life that we all know to be fundamentally untrue is being presented with that kind of conviction again of a marketing manager. Like, yeah, this
Mm,
is like that. It's always been like this. So I think the kind of latent sort of deception for survival, deception for creation, that still exists. And I think it exists in many creative people. It doesn't have to be, merely gay. There are
of
plenty of
course,
people
yeah.
who have been unfree and wanted to, live vicariously through the characters, through the creation. Um, can't think of a single example, unfortunately, at the moment. But that's I sort of want to bring in people like Dennis Cooper, who was actually one of the, ages ago, when Amir and I and Han were sitting having a coffee trying to figure out who are the writers that we're actually interested in, and we were sort of so disappointed that Dennis Cooper is no longer on board with his own project. But the reason I bring him up is that Todd Vero's adaptation of Frisk, which is sort of, I will go back and thank Jared. I know about this film because of Jared. So loathsome fag nonetheless. Um, it that's a sort of an example of idle example of homosexuality producing something that's hyper realistic and hyper dirty and hyper free with itself, that goes to extremes without constraints, but has the good taste to understand how aesthetics work, both in the
Mm,
original text and in Vero's film.
yeah.
So I think all of this is possible, but these positions are increasingly marginal.
Mm.
because there's a bigger force at play that clearly serves, that lines the bed of many more people.
Yeah, recently we did Gary and Deanna, his book Resentment, which is a sort of like
Hmm.
fictionalized account of the Menendez brothers' trial, among other
Yeah.
things like gay life in LA at the time and stuff. Um, Another one who's sort of like not quite as extreme as Dennis Cooper, but very much has that sort of aesthetic sense, I guess, that is just lacking from a lot of stuff now, which is, a lot of that is because of the flattening in terms of literature, at least. A lot of this, the flattening of like, all the buy-ups and stuff like that. You can go into your political economy of the publishing industry as much as you like, but it does, often has trickle down effects with, what gets published and things like that. So your gay novel is kind of your transgressive gay novel is like something
Hmm.
like, I don't know, Garth Greenwell or something like that, which basically is written indistinguishably from like, any other, kind of literary book that, or at least a book that is like trying to be literary. It's sort of the same thing.
Hmm.
Like there's nothing perceptibly gay about it,
You said, Matt, before something about how like Tennessee Williams could hide the gay, inside the words and the body of a Southern dame, right?
Mm,
And this brings me back. I'm going to say something I might get confused, so bear with me. But first of all, the deception, which is kind of inherent in the gay lifestyle, let's say, and we also have an article in the book, Twilights of Homosexuality, which also by Yotam Feldman, which talks about gay deception, like in spycraft and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And I'm interested in and now when we talk about flattening down of identity and everything has to represent allegedly reality and also be kind of an argument for and an apology for
mm,
reality. Where is I mean, where has the gay now or the gay voice, which is deceptive, which can be many things at once, which goes back also back to Proust when he talked about like the gays in end of the 19th century France, that you cannot trust them and they live among you and they work together, and the
Hmm.
gay that will hide himself inside the grand dame, right? I mean, I'm talking about like I wouldn't say it's not the word metaphor is not correct, but in culture now, a metaphor is kind of not allowed anymore, right?
mm.
Where does the gay how can the gay thrive, deceptive gay thrive when he cannot hide anymore behind masks, but still cannot tell the truth, mind you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's an old like wild thing about the truth of masks, right? Like that the mask
True.
is
Hmm.
the thing that you present to the world and is therefore more true than your kind of authentic self or whatever.
Authentic self. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And that plagues so much gay media, so to speak, and I include everything from RuPaul's Drag Race to like the literature now. There's this like need to be authentic, like authentic to the gay experience, and like
What did you
why
think about
why?
like a little life?
Um, I actually found it kind of thrilling because
Yeah.
like I just loved that this evil Japanese woman was like, torturing like loathsome fags essentially. Like so I
Loathsome
found it
twink. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I just found that kind of like delicious and thrilling. Uh, and so I a lot of people have a lot of problems with that politically or whatever because it's, her doing it, but I kind of loved it. For that reason alone. I wouldn't say it's like the greatest novel ever, but yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I
I think
was
what only get
it's a fun read, and I dug the extreme horror of it, but I was always like, what is she doing? Why is she think I was starting also to doubt, like, is this, if a gay guy wrote it, when Dennis Cooper writes it, I know it's the essence of truth in it.
Mm,
And when she wrote about it, I was like, is it even real?
mm.
Is all this debauchery and depravity and debasement really part of my life now, or is Just this is just a woman imagining me for some reason.
Well, it's like that, yeah, women always like write fiction, fan fiction about gays. Like there's that show, the hockey player show that's like what's it called? Heated Rivalry. Which
Yeah,
is written by a woman, the original like books, and it's
Mm.
just all like slash fiction essentially between two made up characters. Um,
yeah,
and it's interesting that some of these conversations around authenticity happened over around that show as well. That it's like so many like really, I don't know how else to say this, but basic gays. Like, and I don't like saying that because basic gays say basic gays, you know. But anyway, well, guilty as charged, perhaps. Um, but there were all these like people hand wringing about how like, oh, it's not authentic because it's not written by a gay man. Like, she doesn't know how gay men have sex, and like, she has an imagination. Like, you know,
Look,
like.
look, I think maybe this is a good point to talk about this sort of uncomfortable political journey and cultural journey of gay men and women. I mean, the word inversion of our title, of
Mm,
course, comes from the conception of homosexuality, in which in a homosexual sexual act, one of the partners becomes inverted, i.e., turns into a sort of
the
pseudo
woman.
woman.
Yeah.
Um, by the way, I'm trying to groom a friend of mine to become my wife. He's having none of it, but you know, like this, I still think this is a good project. Um, yeah. So if you think this is a small obsession of mine, I've already referred to it earlier. If you look at the history of organizations like London's Gay Liberation Front of the early 1970s, and if you look at the manifesto, which is kind of a seminal publication, the booklet, which is maybe 30 pages long, has about 4 lines of like gay rights stuff, as in, please don't beat us up, you know. When we cruise on Hampstead Heath, we're not gonna get in your way, and you know, when we teachers, we're not gonna rape your children, so would you mind terribly leaving us alone? That kind of stuff, which is, you know, all fairly reasonable. And then abolish the family. We need to
Yeah.
have surrogacy soon. And also, women are really cool, aren't they? Let's concentrate on saving women for whatever it is that leftist radical women want. And you sort of wonder, yes, why hasn't anyone written, given how much of this, well, some people have written, but like given how pivotal this moment is to not just gay liberation, but also to women's liberation. Why do we not have a clearer picture of the mechanism by which a bunch of male gay activists became beholden to radical leftist politics? Um, so if you take this seriously, this illustration of the twinning of the gay and the female, you then also owe it to yourself to ask whether it is historically the case. You know, is the fag hag a recent invention, or isn't it? I'm not entirely sure that this is something that's a historical constant. I've not looked at it particularly, but I don't think there's that much literature or gay media, as you say, Matt, before Will and Grace that does this. I write a bit about this in my essay, and I can see there's a fabrication kind of 90s onwards, a fabrication of a very open twinning of not just certainly not the sexuality, but the sensibility, you know, like of
Mm. Yeah,
um,
yeah, it's never really made like that. There's a certain type of gay man who like only has female friends, um, and they're usually quite insufferable. But I've never really understood that because like there's if you're gay, like you're obviously in some ways fascinated with men and masculinity, but then they gravitate towards women. And so maybe it's just because I'm not that kind of girl. But like I just don't understand that. And do you think that comes out of the political formation, or is that like something kind of deeper there? Like is that a question that
look.
because
First of
you
all, we put the
yeah.
first of all we put the book together, so no man would ever say, "I'm not that kind of girl." Ever again. Yeah? So if you've read it, it's clearly not work, Matt. I'm
Yeah.
so sorry. Um, I don't know. I mean, look, the book is not the book is not concerned with with psychology at that level.
Hmm.
I don't think we have a chapter which tries to figure out
But it,
what
but
gay
it is,
man
but I
actually
think it is
is. Having
interesting
said
whether
that,
whether it's a historical or political
yeah,
thing that's sort of in some way inveigled itself into like
I've
relationships
yeah,
between gay men and women.
I think it is. So my small set of evidence, which I already alluded to, to Will and Grace, and I think you can sort of think about that figure historically through the allegiances that the gay political movement, which is obviously much longer than, it's not this 1960s and 70s. This is as long as people have collective consciousness, the political exists. It has been making uneasy allegiances. But I sort of stipulate that the gay man is fundamentally a loner, which of course
Hmm.
I'm writing about myself in this. I how do I solve the problems of having too many female friends? Well, I don't have any friends. That's much easier. Um, but like I tried to look at the record as we would construct it. The first of a gay magazine called Der Eigene, which is published in Germany in the 1890s and goes all the way to only the Nazis put a stop to it. So it's sort of quite a strong presence, completely sidelined by historians of homosexuality for its associations with Max Stirner and egoism. And der
Hmm.
eigene actually translates to the unique.
Hmm.
So what brings this supposedly gay, and we can already talk about a certain freedom. Weimann and Wilhelm in Germany is essentially sort of like one big orgy, as far as we know. Um,
Cabaret
so the,
again. Cabaret just came up again.
Okay. That's slightly wrong years and a
It's
back
in
formation,
it's in Weimar, isn't it?
It's been a back formation as many of these things are. But again, what brings the gay men together? If you flip through the page of the Eigene, it is not the interest in cock that brings them together or as shared politics. It's their interest in very exalted pursuits, which are all sort of individualistic. So all of these
Mm.
people are aesthetes to a certain extent. It's almost a kind of Wildian thing
Mm.
that continues. So anyhow, so this is my like one artifact that tries to look at this history. And the kind of the biggest moment of coalition that we can point to is of course the AIDS crisis, and it should not be denied how many women kind of more selflessly than in the 70s moment end up sort of joining in, blood sisters and so on. All of these things do happen. But if we do take the 80s and the 90s as a sort of like the golden moment in which these relationships, the relationship between gay men and women form, are today's gay men really paying back any of the debt that they owe to that generation of women? I mean, a lot of writers, Sheila Jeffreys, for instance, would suggest that this is not the case, and the battle where this now shows itself up is, of course, in the trans. It is obviously a concern that women have mostly taken up, they've been most vocal about, and a shameful percentage of gay men have anything to say about the trans issue when it comes to women's rights. So yeah, that my whole point in my essay is that these coalitions don't really last. Like our
Mm.
societies, our communities are formed only ever temporarily and usually with an external element or under external threat. I don't think really that much brings gay men together, which is why I think we should become oppressed again, so we can have community and art and all of that. This is
Speaking
happening.
about
I'm
the
not
gay,
even like wishing for it. It's just
Mm.
it's just de facto happening in our culture,
Mm.
no?
I wonder if the gay man is a loner and perhaps even kind of an amoral loner and passive to a degree. Even the gay who is surrounded by women, is it his choice to be surrounded by women, or do women gravitate to a certain gay man?
Mm.
Do women gravitate to being the caretakers of the homo who is dying of AIDS in the hospital or at home? perhaps the gay man didn't actually choose any of that. He was completely passive.
Mm.
And I can see that in gay interactions, like either come to me and create something around me because I'm the center of the universe, but I'm not bothered otherwise.
Yeah, a friend of mine who would self-identify as a fag hag. She called this with women the dynamic. This is getting probably too psychological for you guys again, but she called this the Wendy complex because it's
Yeah.
like, the woman who like wants to like, look after all the lost boys and darn their socks and
Mm.
things like that. It's like a kind of well, yeah, it's a I guess an inversion, maybe not inversion, but some kind of perversion of motherhood or something like,
Well, but what would
yeah,
that be a perversion? I mean, look, men and women are different. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
women
yeah,
too
yeah,
have a caring impulse.
yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah,
that
yeah.
simple.
But like
Yeah, and
in terms of
that
the
has been
fag
politically
haggery, yeah,
abused.
yeah,
But I
Yeah,
also actually I always equate kind of homosexuals my age and even older as kind of eternal children. Like if there's the Wendy complex, there's also the Peter Pan complex,
yes, yeah,
and gays suffer from it or not, whatever. And this and it's kind of a mutually advantageous kind of relationship when you have a woman who mothers her a chosen child and a child who kind of lets a woman be his chaperone and he doesn't have any responsibility for her. She does have some responsibility for him ish and always wishes that one day he'll grow up to be a man, I guess.
mm,
Never
mm.
happens then, alas.
But isn't this something that's already contained in the gay couple? I mean, I've made the joke about trying to find myself a gay male wife. But funnily enough, I was talking about this with the very character in question yesterday. It's like, well, how do you decide in a gay couple who's the wife, who's the husband? Not just in a sexual sense, but like how does the dynamic work out? Yes, of course, you can take up the stereotypical gender roles, which, by the way, is a completely fine solution. No? Why would that not work? But if you want to play around with any of this, then you would want to be able to occupy both positions, either in turn or at the same time. This is the very, very kind of fundamental split. No, you want to be both dominated and to dominate. You want to both submit and to be submitted to. So the awful realization, and this friend of mine reminded me that I had this premonition a long time ago when I was starting to make jokes about him marrying me. Um, he said that I first said, no, that I, Pierre, I would be both the husband and the wife, and he would be the dog. So, so there is a fundamental problem, and I think maybe I have realized this is not the first time that this has been pointed out to me. Maybe I don't believe fundamentally that other people exist. Maybe this is a me problem, which
But
Gareth,
you know
thank
what?
you for spotting in your review of the book. This might be a me problem. Um, yeah, someone
But
else
Pierre
take
also
over.
brought up the essential kind of paradox and problem of equality. And I'm talking equality, I'm talking when you have two men who
Mm.
are, let's say, not different, come together and they don't know, what to do to a degree, right? Am I the wife or the husband? And in liberal society today in the West, also homosexuality is kind of synonymous with equality, right?
mm.
Mm.
And this is kind of a, and while I am, as I said, I'm the liberal here. I'm pro equality and pro, but then you lose some kind of essential thinking, like
Mm.
what is my purpose? What do I do?
Yeah, well, that's the
You
kind
do
of,
a lot
and
of drugs.
yeah, you guys have like in a lot of the essays here, uh, grappling with this question essentially that the homosexual, um, is is invited, not invited, but like is able to enjoy pretty much complete freedom, but
Mm.
like with that comes all of these without any of these guardrails or whatever, or even like conventions of living, like so you are like there is a cost to complete freedom that you have to in some sense um you know decide what you're going to do with that, because you don't have these like easy paths to take. I mean, you can take them, Like you can just, like Pierre said, go with the gender roles and just make it a two guys, one's a wife and one's a husband. But it's also like it's not necessarily like um laid out for you. And that's the kind of curse and blessing of freedom, perhaps.
But here's the kind of fundamental problem which I don't think we can solve. Homosexuality does not have a telos. Homosexuality
Hmm.
only drives itself to extinction. Yes, it
Hmm.
cannot overcome that fundamental problem. And I think what we see in our culture now, to stick it to the liberals in this room, is that of course rather than trying to address that fundamental problem, what our culture does is it goes even further into this kind of amorphous freedom. So um, the fact that queerness has replaced gayness, that this is sort of attractive to teenagers already now in growing numbers, shows that actually the solution we found to the problem is to just defer it until that question completely encompasses everything, not just sexuality, not just relationship, but all aspects of who we are, identity, our behaviors, and how we think of ourselves. Yeah, so we're sort of kicking the can down the road, which will, I'm sorry to say, I'm not optimistic about any of this. By
Mm.
the time we've reached, queer majority, there is a magazine called The Queer Majority. I think,
Oh, that one. Yes, I know about that one.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
I tweeted something once, like I read one of the essays and I like tweeted something innocuous about it. The editor hunted me down, called me an idiot and blocked me. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Aren't they
good
like
luck,
sort
mate.
of, yeah, aren't they sort of like
Mm.
I describe them as militantly bisexual. Like where they think,
Yeah,
like they're these people who are like,
that's precisely it. It's kind
yeah.
of everything must be allowed.
You can be queer
But
even
yeah,
if you're a straight woman.
but look, we used to laugh at this 3 years
Yeah.
ago, and now it's like de facto
Mm,
the case. Like
mm,
Olivia Colman, an English actress, was being derided on social media of the last few days because she said, "Oh, I've always felt a little bit of bit non-binary, and I've been joking to my husband because he has short hair, so yeah, she's clearly non-binary.
Yeah,
Um,
clearly.
and I joked to my husband that I'm a gay man, and like the queer media, but people are applauding, yeah, oh, yet another brave one. Whereas the reactionary gays are saying, "Oh, this is homophobia alive and well. A
mm,
woman claims she's a gay man, erasing us." It's like, what did you think was going to happen, any of you? Like, I mean, is anyone actually satisfied with what we are getting here?
mm,
And
mm,
and the answer can only be positive for the liberal side if they keep on thinking that there's more rope to be had.
mm,
And to be fair to that position, it does have further to go if we embrace transhumanism, if we trans all children by default, and if we blend that bit of transhumanism with some kind of tech transhumanism and area, and Elon Musk's colony on Mars is going to be only trans children, whatever the fuck, like a blend of leftist and rightist accelerationism takes us to. Um, Fine, we can keep going. We can, but none of this addresses the question of what is any of this for.
mm,
And in the introduction to the book, we asked that question: Why would a gay man choose? Why would a homosexual? So naturally, the age came out like that. Um, why would a homosexual choose to be a gay man today as opposed to a queer, as opposed to anything else? Um, that seems to be like a dying position because it has recognized its redundancy, whereas the queer position refuses to acknowledge its position, its terminal decline, because it's defined as something that can never be cut out. And
mm,
that's of course that's a linguistic trick, which really doesn't take too much to deconstruct. Historically, even queerness emerges in a great part because during the AIDS crisis, people want to be separated from their bodies. People don't want to face the fact that they are indeed nothing more than the thing that is
mm,
horrific. Like the human suffering is inalienable, despite the very recent sexual liberation of the gay man at the time. But it doesn't work
mm.
yet. The investment continues.
Is
Sorry,
there
liberals.
is there a I mean, I've written about this myself, and like in terms of queerness and queer theory and all that sort of stuff being a kind of expression of liquid modernity because it's so like there's nothing and perhaps because there's no telos to this stuff like you said, there's nothing that you can grab onto. But is it also like speaking from a I guess, do you think it's a sort of cowardice as well when you think about it? Because it's like, well, if you're gonna claim to be something, even if you're not completely that, at least you're kind of being brave enough to say that that's what you are. Whereas I feel like the queer thing is like this, oh, I'm queer, therefore you cannot possibly understand me or recognize what
Mm.
I am or whatever. Like there's a certain like it always feels like there's someone who's like not completely sure of themselves and they're a bit skittish about like they're having a bob each way essentially. Like they're not really like committing. Like I think you should commit even if it's a delusion. Like just commit to it.
But what should we commit to? Absolutely.
Well, whatever.
Amir
Like
and I,
if
Amir and I never had this talk. Amir, who
yeah.
are you? How do you identify?
Don't, I don't, I'm the one who does not, I don't have no idea who I am. Who cares also?
I mean,
That
I
sounds very
don't,
queer.
but like we should have done this at the beginning of to the pronouns and all of that.
So now,
This
And
is
I
we,
not
do
that sort of
agree
show.
in a way that you have to commit to some non-binary
oh
with
God, no.
Oh god.
is
No, I'm just
definitely, I'm not committed
intervene.
to any.
We're not going to talk about this. No, it's just not. It's
Well,
too
I
early in
Fair
the
actually,
enough.
day.
interesting little fact though, I got the new analytics for the show because I changed hosts for the podcast, and
Mm.
4.5% of my audience are non-binary. So hi, MBs.
Yeah, but
The
look,
bots are not binary.
of course, it's not bye. Fuck, this is not for you. You don't exist. It's very simple. No, but this is of course being like pushed by fucking data analytics people. This is not,
Yeah, of course, of
no
course.
one actually. This is what they say when they mean we don't know. I mean the data people rather
Yeah.
than the everyone
Not
knows.
just that.
Um, Mark, can I ask you a question? So
Hmm.
you've written a novel that you said touches on a lot of this, which I'm sorry to say I wasn't aware of. But
Mm.
if your listeners haven't already heard about this a million times,
No,
would
they've
you
not
mind
heard about it because
would you
I'm shopping it around.
would you mind talking about your novel and tell us how you would have rewritten a book from that perspective?
Well, the novel is essentially a the story of a gay throuple, and the breakdown of that situation, and how like it's this like they go into it. It's set in the trendy inner north of Melbourne, where I live, and it's not based on my life. Just so I have to keep telling my mother that as well because there's a lot of stuff in it that is not. I didn't do that. Um, that's what I tell my mother anyway. So like, but yeah, there's it's I've never been in a throuple situation, but like I've seen a lot of it, and so it's this like uh exploration of what happens when people decide to go down that path of absolute freedom by bringing in like essentially a demonic twink chaos agent and what happens after that. But it
There is a
touches
I
on a
demand.
mean,
lot of this stuff. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, God. I don't think we have too many thruples in London, but pretty much every gay relationship I'm aware of is open now.
Mm,
It's
mm.
like that's become a default over since like the last 6 7 years.
Yeah.
Complete change. And again, that will be de facto the norm in broader society, unless there's a broader conservative shift that suppresses all of this.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
institution of marriage has stopped
Yeah.
meaning much. Yeah, interesting. So
I mean,
what how do they end
that's
up? Like is there a non-spoiler way of saying how
well, let's
what's
there's
the
no
moral lesson of your novel? Do
look
they
at
end badly and go to
like well
hell?
at heart I'm a dramatist, so there's got to be complex a conflict. So it's not all rosy, but I think it ends in a interesting way. But it's also like intergenerational too. So it's like Gen Xer, millennial, and Gen Z. So it's like that's what trouble is. So it's like saying there's a lot to be said in that dynamic too. So
Who pays the rent?
oh, Gen Xer, of course.
Amir, we're fucked. We're really fucked. is what we have to put up with.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
But yeah, like
yeah.
so it's yeah, I've just been it's funny though as well because it's sort of like shopping it around is it's kind of hard to place because it's like Australia is even worse for like, stuff that's I guess gay themed or whatever. It's awful. Like it's got to be all affirmative or affirming, I guess is the word. It's got to be very ideologically, correct. Uh,
But I think,
and
this is the case worldwide. I mean,
yeah,
I
yeah,
can
yeah.
tell
Oh,
you.
but it's even more pronounced here. Like it's not in some places, I think overseas, it's not as it's like it's a little bit more understated maybe, but like yeah, and it's just yeah, it's hard to place that here. So I have been looking internationally as well, but then it's an
Well,
Australian story as well, so I don't know if it's too parochial,
hmm.
but yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
what's the
Anyway.
Australian story? If I can sort of piggyback on that and think about what the fuck is Australia? The criticism that Jared made of our book, but from calling us
We'll call
five
this
times.
this episode title will be called Jared
Jesus,
Sucks. That's,
Jared. No,
that's
no, we love Jared. We love Jared. Jared is a happy boy, which is what I'm aiming at. Jared insisted in his review that we are post-liberals, even though this word does not feature in the book, and I don't think he knows what it means, but never
Hmm.
mind. Um, his main critique is that if we just went to the beach and had a good time and fell in love, things would look much better. He does have a point.
Yeah, it's not untrue.
Yeah, well, Amir is in the beach. Amir is now in like sitting in the Middle East, having a great time, while talking about how miserable Berlin is. Um, you seem to be having, your throuple is not such a terrible idea. What is it about Australia? Why are you so stupidly happy and uncritical?
Oh, I guess it's the
That's not,
beach,
the
pretty much.
beach.
Yeah.
It's literally
Although,
that.
well, like Jared, like me, lives in Melbourne, which is
Oh,
probably not the best weather for like there are some beaches that are kind of like an hour's drive away, but you want to go on a nice day because weather's very changeable here. And it's not like it's probably the most like European type city in Australia in that way. But culturally, but also the weather is a little bit like it's not Southern Europe, it's like the other parts of Europe. It's a bit changeable.
so I think we have to do a new classification. It's not tops and bottoms. It's going to be beach gaze versus mountain gaze. I
Well,
am,
yeah,
I,
I am,
I just went to the beach the other day. So.
I'm the mountain gay. I'm sort of wander about the fog, contemplating the abyss at every fucking opportunity. The beach is just boring. Like, what do you get to do? It's just
Just
same,
lay there.
same.
Yeah, just lay there.
Sand,
Yes.
salty. Hmm,
Yeah.
no,
Oh,
not
there's
doing
nothing
that.
like an Australian beach. Like, but you got to experience it to get it, I guess. But I
Well, I
don't know.
didn't. Hence a terrible book,
Yes,
apparently.
that's right. That's right. Um, but yeah, like that's funny that you mentioned that actually, because I've been thinking about this. Like, there's a complacency here because it's so like, um, you can just go to the beach and have a good time. There are also mountains here, so you can go to the mountains as well and
Mm.
have a good time. It's all very pretty. It's not
Well,
too crowded
hmm.
yet, but it's getting that way though. So.
It's sort of a question of, like what do you need to provide your populace with, either as a state or just the land to get them to accept certain aspects of their lives. So in a kind of European tradition, or at least the tradition that I was brought up in, we just Christian essentially, or Catholic in particular, is that we arrange our lives around making the inevitability of suffering bearable.
Mm,
I don't mean this even as funny. Like, I mean,
mm,
it's the
mm.
sort of the
Yeah,
biggest
yeah.
thing in my life. Like
Mm.
I'm miserable all the time, and I don't mean this glibly. I mean this as a real thing that I know the world to be constructed around. Um, and when one thinks about how states, how cultures, how societies organize themselves around that as a problem, you can sort of connect it to the cultures they produce. You can connect to how they extract the materiality. So from a certain perspective, the fact that fuck it, we are going down a hill in a hand cart, whatever the phrase is. But there's a beach. That's absolutely fine. Yeah, that's sort of one way of coping. So Australia might be becoming a sort of neoliberal hellhole in some senses, but you will not notice at all. Not even not notice until it's too late, but maybe not noticed at all, because
Yeah.
that will
It's
compensate
the
that.
Huxleyan dystopia rather than the
Yeah.
Orwellian. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a good point. Except that, of course, there are different levels at which the compensation, the kind of demagoguery can be produced. And I guess the difference would be that in something like Catholic Christian Europe, we would be living in a world where actually the edifice, the coping mechanisms are very ornate, but they are very obviously produced by institutions. And one's participations in the creation and maintenance of these institutions is required on a daily or at the very least weekly basis. You know, marriage, the church, and so on and so on. I mean, a lot of this, of course, has gone downhill, but this is still the system we live in. Is a culture in which actually, access to like unbridled joy of the beach necessary. I mean, that's sort of enviable to a certain extent. But then we have to sort of measure it against the third option, which is the sort of consumer boom. I mean, we had this in the West, of course, post-war. China is experiencing a bit of it now. China is sort of an amazing example where repression is completely fine socially, because at the moment they're having quite a good time. As as you look at the evolutionary cycle of civilizations, nobody minds being spied on because it gives them consumer goods. So yeah, what are the ways of staving off the inevitable? We've so far catalogued the beach, we've catalogued faith and sort of like ornate historical or cultural things that I completely unfairly claim that Europe has a monopoly on, versus consumerism.
Yeah.
I would suggest that there is a way to blend those three, and I'm not entirely sure whether homosexuality as a thing is on the right side of this composition at the moment.
No, I don't think so either. It's yeah. So I do want to ask both of you specific things about each of your chapters because you edited it, but you also contributed. I'll start with Amir. So your chapter was about the Queers for Palestine thing, and I've always and I have to say I'm not like jerking off or anything, but like this made me like understand it a bit better because I've never understood it. Like I just don't get it. Like I like like it not even from a political point scoring sort of thing. Why are these blue haired like transsexuals like so obsessed with Palestine? But you bring in like a really interesting look at it that I never thought about before. Like it's more about desire and eroticism from your point of view. Can you like expand on that a bit?
Listen, there's a lot of angles in which you can tackle this subject, and I
Mm.
really tried not to kind of, that line of Queers for Palestine is like chicken for KFC and all that
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah.
That's not a good argument, actually,
Mm.
because, for instance, a nation, okay, if we're going to talk about, for instance, not the gay stuff, but the political stuff, a nation does not, its right to exist does not hinge on whether it likes homos or not, right?
Mm.
So let's say if in Palestine or in other Middle Eastern nations or any kind of more religious or conservative society, homosexuals are not allowed. Let's say that does not mean that that country ceases to have a right to exist. And on the other hand, the fact that gays are kind of more are allowed in Israeli society does not give it any moral high ground necessarily.
Mm.
So that's so I really don't like that kind of critique. Um, there is another critique I didn't want to get into, which is kind of European and or Anglo-Saxon, whatever kind of certain obsession with, on one hand, the Jews, and on the other hand, the way it sees the East, okay, and the Middle East and the Arab world and stuff like that. But the thing that I saw, which really is relevant to the discussion of homosexuality for this book, is that I've found out that there is definitely a kind of competition of desirability within these kind of closed circles. I don't know how much this goes to more general kind of society regarding pro-Palestinianism. But within the queer circles, especially the ones I hang around with or hung around with till recently, uh, uh, pro-Palestinianism and excessive radicalism. Not that I'm saying that to be pro-Palestinian is necessarily extremely radical, but yes, fascination with terrorism, with political extremism has sexual mystique to it, and it has done so since the 60s at least, right? And probably much before. And there's, the famous radical chic from Tom Wolfe, I think, wrote about it. Um, and again, I don't know so much about 60s culture, and how deeply they felt about it, but at least in the 60s, Americans had the war in Vietnam, which had to do with them. Okay, they were there, they were dying for it, and etc. While here, this is a conflict which has not much to do with the US. Not, I mean, sure, there's money and geopolitics involved, but the people dying and killing are here in the Middle East, right? And the war, as it is here, it is extremely unsexy. Okay, it is bloody, it is violent, it is depraved, and it has become a cultural coin and sexual coin that you barter in um, dating apps, in hookup apps, in chills, in in the clubs, and it is fascinating to me. And I was really wondering because extremism is, let's say, Pierre loves to talk about the death drive, okay? Extremism and transgression, to a certain degree, is an element of the death drive, okay? And I was wondering why the death drive and transgression and political extremism and radical violence is so um, fascinating and alluring to the gaze. And I do believe that the death of the self and the annihilation of the body uh, is a big part of gay erotica or gay sexuality, I would say.
And
So
there's even
I try,
yeah,
yeah, sorry.
historical figures who like sort of embody that, like Yukio Mishima and stuff like that. Like
So
it's
we got Yukio Mishima,
yeah,
definitely, yeah.
yeah.
And also, talking about Mishima, before he committed seppuku in front of the parliament in Japan, he
Mm,
did this movie, which is called Harakiri or Seppuku. I don't know. It's a small movie. Mishima was a bodybuilder.
hmm
So in the movie, he is kind of half naked with a little kind of loincloth, and he commits ritual suicide. So there's a thing about that death drive and violence in homosexual kind of erotic imagination, which is not is also to be performed.
mm,
Okay, so this is me being at my most beautiful as I die. So obviously you have the Dennis Cooper universe of death and annihilation as the supreme point of beauty. And you have, in the gay saints, I think Pierre talked about it, but I don't remember in what context, of Saint Sebastian, for instance. Okay, this beautiful young man who can also go to Jesus if we must, uh, in the point of his death. So kind of this, and this is also a contradiction probably in every sexuality, but gay sexuality, which also produces no children, of death as the
mm.
supreme act of eroticism.
Well, and interesting as well the connection with Mishima because that's an image, Sebastian, that he's was always obsessed with. It's like
Mm.
heavily featured in Confessions of a Mask, and like he's like wanking to it to the painting in that book.
Do you know?
And
Do you remember which one? Which painting? Because there's so many
oh, I
depictions. I
can't
mean,
remember which one. It's
the
like
art
the
history is saturated with Sebastian.
yeah, I can't remember which one it was. But I think he does say which one it is, but like, or maybe he doesn't. But like, he's talking about that and like how erotic it is, and it is to do with the death stuff as well, like annihilation, and that is,
But
yeah.
that's a misreading. The reason that Amir thinks that I have anything to say about San Sebastian is that I just reviewed Ming Wong's remake of Derek Jarman's 1976 Sebastiana, which
Oh
is
yeah.
for Jarman is a Latin film.
I
Sort
actually
of,
like that film because it's sort of
yeah,
tedious.
yeah, it
Like
is quite tedious.
the dancing scene that goes on
Yeah,
for like 20 minutes and you're like
yeah.
fucking end.
I had to rewatch it to be able to write a review, and I watched it like four times speed because like they're all not
For too
dressed.
long.
Anyhow,
Yeah.
Ming Wong is a contemporary artist who lives in Berlin who remakes Western classics. He was really popular with this in the sort of like 2010 and thereabout. He remade a bit of Fassbinder and so on. Yeah, but the point with San Sebastian is that his iconography, of course, is entirely created as a sequence of icons referring to icons, because like a lot of early Christian saints, he's not actually a historic. We don't know historically anything about him.
Hmm.
The earliest written record is like 100 years after. But the only reason that this is worth talking about is that Sebastian is not actually killed by the arrows. He doesn't die, and this is super interesting to the question of the death drive. Like you
Hmm.
want to come as close to autoerotic asphyxiation as you can, but still pull out and wait to be clubbed to death, which is how
Hmm.
Sebastian in the end
Yeah, yeah.
in the end dies.
Yeah, and it is the like, and I guess it goes back to the terrorism thing as well, like a kind of martyrdom as well, like
Mm.
and making the violence more meaningful, like not just in a sexual sense, but it's like it's for some kind of reason,
So
like
Sure. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
but the reasons are kind of up for grabs. Yes, Sebastian is
yes,
killed
yeah,
for his faith, for his
mm,
conversion to Christianity. That's the Christian myth. Come the 19th century, he's supposedly killed because he was a fag. Like, well, there's absolutely no evidence that he was. There's literally no way
he
to
looks like.
historically to suggest that.
Wow.
Well,
that's
but he
just
only looks like
Roman
that.
propaganda, like
Yeah,
Christians are fags.
well, no, that's Christian propaganda. It's
Yeah,
Renaissance
yeah, yeah. I
propaganda. Yeah.
know.
So this is the interesting art historical thing. Even though this subject has been written about so much that I sort of kind of dreaded writing that review, but I needed to write something negative. Like I have a quota of bad reviews I have to write. Um, yeah, but Sebastian is the formation. Why do the Renaissance painters want to have this beautiful male figure? There's not that many opportunities in Christianity to have a naked male. I mean, you can do that to Jesus on a crucifix, but that comes with certain
Mm.
restrictions. There was I forget which century, but there's a it must be Renaissance or post-Renaissance controversy where um, women start confessing having impure thoughts at the site of San Sebastian in church. And you
I
sort of
used to
go
get
like,
that with the Jesus statue when I
you did.
it's like Jesus in our
Ah,
church was ripped. So I was like,
look, Andreas Serrano and Piss
mm,
Christ. This
mm.
is super interesting because it came out. Well, people say that this got completely discredited in the Epstein files. So Andreas Serrano in the 80s makes Piss Christ, this sort of infamous image of a plastic statue of Christ submitted in urine. There's a whole campaign with Republicans in Senate trying to stop the National Endowment for the Arts funding this ever again. Scandal, scandal, scandal. And what the responses are kind of interesting that curators end up speaking on behalf of Serrano much later and says, no, he's a good Catholic boy. He's talking about commodification. It's like, why is this statue of Jesus not only so perfect, but also so mass produced? But there's an invitation to an opening of Serrano's in the Epstein files. So now people like me who have sort of said anything about this publicly, sort of supposedly have to completely change our tune because I think the email contains something like, "Oh, there will be a protest by radical Catholics. Come, it will be fun." So I know, yeah, the email is
Hmm.
from Serrano. Serrano invites Epstein. Is that right?
Wow.
Oh, it
Oh,
doesn't.
I don't know. I haven't been
Can't
across
be.
it. Like, I'm just completely uninterested in it, to
Yeah,
be quite honest.
the
But
only thing I did is to look for my name in the Epstein file.
Well, speaking of you, Pierre, let's move on to like your contribution. So you wrote about community, among other things, but like I did have this question before I read your piece actually that I did want to, it was sort of, and maybe you can talk about it when I ask it, which is the gay community a myth now, and was it always? And what did you sort of, what did you come to? What were your conclusions when you?
Yes and yes. That's what the answers. No, I tried to already spoke about this a
Mm,
bit today, but I tried to find ways in which we can think of a gay community being constituted by either historical externalities or by cultural interest or sexual interest or political interests. And I mean that to answer these questions involves one, an understanding of what would constitute a community at all, and obviously all sorts of mythologies and sociological and sociopolitical theories to draw on. And one of the things that I'm really interested in to sort of go with the theme of asking difficult questions about, Daddy, what did you do in a big gay war? Kind of stuff is I borrow the thinking of Roberto Esposito, who thinks about community and immunity. So for him, the munus of community refers to an obligation. It's a sort of shared gift to which everyone is obliged to contribute. This sort of by now politically, I think, sort of makes sense. I think, or at least with my position, um, I think people contribute to the creation of a community in a certain way. There is a set of obligations that members of a community need to have towards one another for that community to be meaningful. And from that perspective, at least, I find the last 50 years or so, just literally from the moment of liberation, um, and even including the AIDS crisis, that gay men want to opt out of the shared obligations. So, the Larry Kramer moment, which almost admits the normal heart of the play, almost admits that the existence of a certain section of gay men who are so hooked on the freedom that they would keep on barebacking, knowing that it has risks for everyone.
mm,
Keep the infections going. So this, for me, is an example of. I might not. I don't know if I'm actually right about this in the book, but it doesn't matter. This for me is an example of like the refusal to participate in a shared responsibility of any community. We saw the same thing with monkeypox, and maybe Amir has something to say about that.
Nothing to
No,
say.
no, he doesn't. He doesn't. Let's move past. Let's move past that. Um, um, yeah. So, how do we conceive of community? It's either something that's being fueled by mutual obligations, or we take the kind of the opposite idea, which is a much more left-wing idea of people like Jean-Luc Nancy, who talk about inoperative community. So a community can only be really realized if it's formed, it's not his terms, organically, but he thinks that the imposition of aims over a community is sort of antithetical to what a community would be. And this stems from a kind of deep and very confused debate over how political organizing could work in France in the 1980s. Now, why am I saying all of this? Well, I'm saying all of it because if we have certain conceptions of communities, we can figure out whether historically, and at least our recent, therefore very strongly memory hold past, there are good examples of gay men coming together and kind of either contributing to a shared project against their will, the gift is sort of given under voluntarily, under duress and out of obligation, or whether this kind of more amorphous, aimless group of people coalesces. And I can't say that I was able to construct through one of these prisms, a coherent narrative. I really do not think that the gay community that applies to people our age really has existed in one consistent shape. So that this is almost obvious. I mean, we've said things to this effect quite a few times already, but the LGBTQIA2S and whatever happens next community, that's a fabrication of the NGO system, that doesn't understand that this, well, it sort of understand that it's doing it, but it's unstoppable. Essentially, it's the same prism by which, the queer majority can be brought into existence. It becomes a useful political demographic unit. But what do gay men really have in common in a state of kind of late neoliberalism? They can be brought together, I don't know, by sexual interests. And I write about, oh God, sort of remembering that I did actually write this. I write about the cum dump as a sort of focus of a sexual community. Um, um,
Well, that's interesting. I don't know. I'm not really that familiar with the Rancière kind of concept, but I've always liked what back when I used to, study this stuff in a past life. I used to like the sociologist Richard Sennett's idea of a
yeah.
community being something that does something together. And so like
Mm.
if you go to church, you're doing something with a community of people. You're, you know, venerating your god or
Hmm.
whatever, or whatever. Like so, but yeah, there's no sense of that. There's no sense of like what are we all doing together? Like we're not aiming for towards something or doing anything together. So like, is it actually a community? And whether it ever was is a interesting question, I think.
Mm. Fun fact, Richard Sennett was at one point a card-carrying homosexual.
At one point,
At one point, married a woman shortly after.
really
I can't
interesting.
remember where I've got this
Okay.
from. I might be wrong, but
Interesting.
I
Yeah.
don't know. Wouldn't say. It's definitely not a comment that solicits interesting. It's inconsequential at best. But look again, the kind of history post 1960 of what brought gay men together has been either peril, and that peril was either
Mm,
political, which is I talked about the Gay Liberation Front, or um, the um, the AIDS crisis, which
mhm,
brings us again in more coalition with women. And there is enough evidence to convince me that actually without women, the AIDS crisis would have just obliterated gay
mm,
men, as in we would not have been able to get together. I mean, what it is that gay men got together for is also a sort of important question, because the idea that political demands would cure diseases is sort of
mm,
unhinged, but it got lodged in our mind precisely because of the AIDS crisis.
mm,
Anthony Fauci was head of CDC during the AIDS crisis and during COVID is literally not a coincidence. And the cozy relationship between Larry Kramer and Anthony Fauci is sort of well written. David Moulton, who contributes to the book, writes about this a bit, but he wrote about it much more expansively and compact. And
Someone
I was
should
like,
do some slash fiction of those two,
Uh, I mean, I think
Fauci and
Kramer,
and Kramer.
Kramer, Kramer kind of does that a
Already
bit in his
does,
own
yeah,
writing, but he doesn't, he doesn't ever come out with it. Like he's too
yeah,
embarrassed about it all.
yeah, yeah. Um,
So post the AIDS crisis, I think the community has to dissolve because rampant individualism is the order of the day, and this is how the homosexual identity asserts itself. The pink
mm,
pound. And queerness never saves it. It's sort of,
mm,
the projection onto queerness of all sorts of collective endeavors that just doesn't seem to happen because every single time they try to figure out what the project is, it's just a hatred of norms.
mm,
And
mm,
and that means that you don't create norms for your own community, and at that point your community can't really work. A couple of things that I find potentially interesting as in a kind of dark vision of a near future, or dark but maybe ultimately rewarding vision of a near future, is that we do have a couple of conveniently memory hold precedents in the last 20 years. So one is a series of terrorist attacks, or not even terrorist attacks. I'm thinking about the supposed martyrdom of Matthew Shepard. That's 96, 97. We have a terrorist attack in London on the Admiral Duncan pub, which produces very different outcomes. And then much more recently, we have the Pulse nightclub shooting. So I write about the kind of trajectory by which the first two events, the complete veneration of Matthew Shepard, who, as far as we can actually know, was not murdered for his homosexuality. It was a drug feud.
Drug thing,
Stephen Jimenez writes about this, but his writing, his investigative reporting about this will not convince either the city of Laramie, Wyoming, where the event took place, nor the cottage industry of plays and books and media that it has given rise to. They will just not buy this. This is a quiz, and he is the kind of San Sebastian, stabbed to death. It's sort of worrying how easily this kind of glib things come out. Now, split from the tongue, but never mind. Here we are. The really interesting thing that happens is the next year is the Admiral Duncan nail bombing by a sort of like an omni-hater right winger who in prison sort of ends up admitting to faking his mental illness, but he hates Jews, Pakis. This is his words, obviously. Like, he makes a long list. So what happens interestingly at that point is that the community cannot be brought together on sexual terms in response to the attack, because the attacker says, I hate the gays for the degeneracy. But in the middle of the 90s, the gay man does not see himself as degenerate. He sees himself as the opposite. He is the polite version. He's liberated. He's transcendent that. And then you fast forward a couple of decades, and the Pulse nightclub shooting, which as far as we know, was not actually a homophobic attack, but people have volunteered to make themselves queer martyrs of that. So I'm sort of looking at the dissolution of the ways in which the community would be formed. So different responses to like actual peril. That's just one of my examples. And I'm finding it impossible. Like there is no community that comes together in the wake of the Pulse nightclub shooting, because that's fake. It's based on an untruth, the way that people supposedly came together in their grief. That cannot be sustainable, and it cannot be as meaningful. But then, I don't know, myths of peril. Myths, yeah, maybe I'm completely wrong.
Maybe provocatively,
peril
the only real gay community is the chemsex orgy, where everyone is coming together.
That you have to
Well,
ask
after hours
Ask
and hours of
Jared
sex.
about
Guys, I just want to say I'm in our Airbnb and she might be coming any second. I'm just saying that, let you know.
Oh yeah,
that if
I was gonna wrap us up anyway. So but yeah, it's been great talking to you guys. I just wanted to know what's next for you guys. Either together or separately. Will you be doing another book together, or are you doing separate projects? What's happening?
Well, Amir, if I have a fake wife, Amir is my mistress, so we're working together, unfortunately. There'll be more publishing. There'll be more publishing. Amir and I and Nina Power and Travis Jefferson have got together, and we're going to be producing more anthologies, and we're going to be publishing a bit of fiction this year. But Amir has the
Nice.
most exciting series that I'm really happy that he's come up with.
Which is?
So we're doing a little exploration of time, place, and crime. We're doing a sociological, or let's call it meta sociological kind of overview of the connection between transgressive behavior, crime, uh, corruption, etc., as it is relevant to certain places in the world. We have, uh, you know, how come I haven't pitched this yet, so I'm kind of stuttering and I'm very excited about it. But how does crime change relative to where it takes place, to the culture, to the language, to the customs, and to the topography? There will be short booklets, and we've got very exciting writers joining us. So I hope it'll be as good as I think it's gonna be.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, that's
Well,
going to be called Genius Loki, and this and a whole bunch of other titles will be coming out in the second part of the year.
wonderful, wonderful. And so where can we find you guys and get the book? Do you want direct sales, or do you want to go for want people to go to Amazon or wherever they want to buy it?
Direct sales are good. They will
Mm.
all happen out of the same warehouse.
Hmm.
Global distributor has a warehouse somewhere in Australia. So wherever
Yeah.
you get it from. Verdun has a website. It's verdur.in, and Inversion is the book is right at the top.
Yeah.
But yeah, all sales are good sales. All negative reviews are also reviews. Thanks, Jared. Sorry, that's very gracious of you to let the only Australian podcast be about the only other Australian person I have ever thought about. This is very good of you.
Well, I'm very grateful that I'm the other one that you thought about.
Mm.
So, thank you for joining us, guys. Yeah, it's been great, and yeah, we'll have to have you on again for your next projects.
Oh, thank you.
Mhm. All right,
Matt,
see you
thank you
guys
so
later.
much.
Ciao.
Ciao.